Hi guys, so if you don't know me, my name is Kendra. I mostly am active on TikTok. As you can see, I have the wall of SpongeBob art behind me, and that's what I typically do on TikTok. I just did a Rick and Morty painting on TikTok, so if you don't follow me on TikTok, it's Kencay, Kencay. That's where I'm most active. Today I wanted to do a story time on my birth control non-horror story. I just switched birth control methods, and I find that when I search for birth control methods that I'm considering, the only thing that I typically find are horror stories. And that can be really intimidating when you're just looking for the average experience of most women. So the birth control method that I switched from was Depo Provera injection, and I didn't really have a horror story at all with that. So I feel like if you are searching for an average experience, I had an average experience. So I thought maybe I would tell my story and then detail like the events of the entire almost 5 years that I was on Depo, and then go through why I decided to switch and what I switched to. Before I do any of that, I do want to preface that my experience is not guaranteed to be your experience. You could have a horror story, or you could have an average experience like I had, or you could have less symptoms than I had. Everybody's different, and there's usually always one birth control method that will work best for you in your lifestyle. But you know, there could be multiple that work for you. There could be only one that works for you. There could be none that work best for you in your lifestyle. You really just need to find the method that you can deal with the side effects the best, because there's always going to be side effects. And that works best with your lifestyle. So I'm going to take you way back to late May, early June of 2016. I decided to start the Depo Provera injection right after I graduated high school. I was going into college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I wanted something that was relatively low maintenance and that would stop my menstrual cycles. Before I was on any type of birth control, my menstrual cycles were very painful and very inconvenient for me. So it was debilitating for about a day or two every single month at least. And with my lifestyle and how active I was on campus and everything, that just wasn't feasible for me. So I decided to get on Depo. My now fiance, I had been dating for 2 years at the time. We've been together for 7 years, March 30th. So it's been quite a while. But, so when I first got prescribed Depo, I went to a doctor that was a friend of my fiance's family. So I basically just set an appointment with her because my fiance's family knew her. She seemed to be not so professional with me, and I don't know if that's just because she knew my fiance's family, or if that's just how her manner was with patients. I have no idea. I don't even think she works at the same hospital anymore. I don't even know if she's still practicing medicine. But I ended up going to that appointment, and I was newly 18. I had turned 18 the December before, and this was the first appointment that I had been to without a parent. So it's like, yes, I'm going to go and get myself on birth control, and I'm going to do by myself. I'm going to go to the appointment by myself and all that stuff. So I told her that I wanted to start on birth control, and she just immediately went to the pill. And I was like, that's not going to work for me. First of all, I have a hard time taking pills anyway. Second of all, I don't have a set schedule at all. I never do. And I'm never going to remember to take the pill at exactly the same time every single day. It's not going to work for me, even if I could take pills. So she seemed kind of hesitant to prescribe me Depo. The reason I wanted to get on it in the first place was because I have a family history. My mom took Depo in between my brother and I, and she didn't have really any side effects at all. So I knew that someone in my family had taken it and had a good experience with it. It's relatively low maintenance. You get a shot every 3 months, so you get 4 shots a year. And it's quick and easy. It takes like maybe 5 minutes, So that's what I decided to do. And it stops your periods, and the pill does not stop your periods. So after talking with me about the possible side effects and all that other stuff, she really only focused on like the possible weight gain, which it's really just an increase in appetite. You're not guaranteed to gain weight on that. But she focused on all that stuff, and then we talked, and she agreed to prescribe me Depo. She did an exam, just a physical exam. She didn't do like any pelvic exams or anything like that on me, which she probably should have. But she didn't, and she took blood, and then she sent me on my way. I did not get my shot that day. She didn't give me any aftercare instructions or any instructions at all, for that matter, on what I was supposed to do to get my shot. So I left the appointment, and the nurse at the front, or the receptionist at the front, was like, "See you in 11 weeks." I was like, okay, I have no idea what that means. Do I get my first shot in 11 weeks? Like, okay. So there was an obvious miscommunication with the doctor and the receptionist and the appointment scheduler and all that stuff, because the receptionist thought that I had gotten my shot at the appointment and that I was scheduled to come back in 11 weeks to get my second shot. The doctor didn't prescribe me, like, she didn't tell me when to go pick it up. She didn't tell me where to go pick it up. She didn't say when to come back to get it. Nothing. She just took my blood, and she didn't talk to me again. So I walked out of the appointment, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I just thought, okay, I'll come back in 11 weeks for my first shot, which was not what I was supposed to do, but I wasn't given any instructions. And being the shy person I am, I just didn't ask. So I had gone to my now fiance's house for dinner, and I came home late. So a couple days after my appointment, my mom asked me, "Hey, did you ever get your shot?" And I said no. She just said, "See you in 11 weeks." So I just thought I would come back in 11 weeks. So my mom was like, "Yeah, that's not how that works." So we ended up calling the office, and as it turns out, I was supposed to come back the next day to get my shot, but there was no instruction. She never told me that. There were no instructions on where I should pick up my prescription. None of that. So yeah, so that totally went over my head. I obviously didn't come in the next day to get my shot. That's not what she told me to do. She didn't tell me to do anything. So I'd missed that appointment, and she told me to come in a couple days after that, pick my shot up at this pharmacy, and bring it in, and then we'll give it to you. So unfortunately, by that time, I was no longer on my period, and you're supposed to get your first injection while you're on your period for like the best results. So at that point, I was no longer on it. So she advised me to use another method of birth control for the next 3 months until I could get my second dose. So your first dose isn't, I guess, fully effective until the next dose if you don't get it on your period. So that's not what I did. So I had to wait. Technically, your window is between 11 and 13 weeks to get your next dose. Sometimes they will advise you to come in at 11 weeks after your first dose, so that it prevents any like breakthrough bleeding or anything like that, which I did find it to be accurate. So they had advised me to come in at 11 weeks after my first dose. So at this time of my second dose, that's when they tell you that it's most effective and will protect you against pregnancy. So that's what I did. I was on Depo for the entire time that I was in college. So every 3 months, I would make an appointment at the student health center, and I would get my prescription at a pharmacy in my hometown, because I went home every single weekend for work. and I would bring that prescription with me back to school, and then I would bring it in the office, and they would just give it to me. I was not given very many instructions at all about how to maintain your prescription or anything like that. So I was not told that you are supposed to have an annual exam every single year that you are on Depo to be represcribed. Basically, they need to like check on you, and every 2 years they have to refill the prescription, like represcribe it to you, because you're only supposed to be on it for 2 years at a time. That is because one of the main symptoms of Depo is bone density loss. So they want to make sure that you are doing well at the 2-year mark so that they can represcribe it to you. And they do that annually as well, just for like pelvic exams. So they did not tell me that at the time that I was prescribed Depo. They didn't tell me really anything. So when the 1-year mark rolled around, I was in college, and I scheduled my appointment to get my shot, and the pharmacy wouldn't call it in. So I had no idea why. So I called the student health center and I asked them, and they said, oh, it's because you have to schedule your annual exam before we can fill the prescription. So obviously I'm frustrated because I'm at 12 weeks on the dot, and I have 1 week left in my window before my birth control is lapsing. And I have to schedule an annual exam, and it's literally the day I'm supposed to get my shot. So luckily they were able to fit me in for an annual exam at the student health center, and they filled the prescription at the UT pharmacy, and I was able to pick it up and just bring it to the office and get it. Usually during the annual exam, we'll just do a pelvic exam. They'll ask you some questions about how you're feeling, what side effects you're having, if you're eating enough calcium, and if you're doing enough high-impact exercises. So basically that entails, like, I would eat a lot of, like, cheese, dairy, yogurt, milk, stuff with calcium in it. Sometimes you need to take a calcium supplement for the bone density problem. Otherwise, you can just supplement that with your diet. And then the low impact or high impact exercises keep your bones strong during the time that you're on Depo. So at that time, I was walking, I would say probably 2 to 5 miles a day on campus for my classes and for my other activities. So my doctor had said that was enough. So that's what I was doing to maintain my healthy bones. And aside from that, the Depo shot is progesterone. It's a hormone, a synthetic hormone that your body makes during pregnancy. So basically the side effects of that are it kind of like loosens your joints and your ligaments and your lower abdominal muscles and stuff like that. So that gives you classic pregnancy symptoms like heartburn and acid reflux and loose joints, and your stomach muscles are not as tight as they would be, things like that. So I did experience some nausea periodically, and it was weird the way that it happened, because usually it would only last for like the length of one dose. So I would go like 3 months with nausea as a symptom, and then as soon as I would get my next dose, it would go away. I did notice that when I was walking on campus, my knees, like the joints in my knees, felt like loose, so my knees would hurt when I walked on campus. It wasn't like an insane amount of pain, but you could tell a difference. Headaches. My headaches did increase pretty dramatically when I was on Depo. I typically would get, like, before I was on Depo, I might get a headache, like, once every 6 months. But when I started on Depo, I started getting, like, tension headaches, like when you move too fast, shake your head back and forth, or bend over to pick something up, your head would just throb, just pound. I was getting those quite frequently. I would say probably 4 times a week, if not more. So I was taking ibuprofen for headaches quite often, especially during stressful times, like around exam times, I would get a lot of headaches. The acid reflux combined with the nausea, that was very present. Like if I would wake up one morning and I would go to class and all I would have would be like coffee or something, like I would drink coffee before class or during class, my first period class, I would get acid reflux and like nausea. So I would have to eat something to sit on my stomach. I did notice that around the first couple weeks that I would get a dose, I would have an increased appetite. So basically it just resulted in me snacking more throughout the day. And because of that, I did notice a slight weight gain. But once I realized that that's what it was, I just limited myself to 3 healthy meals a day, and I was able to drop that weight. And then I was on Depo until February of this year, so 2021. So it was nearly 5 years that I was on Depo. My 5-year mark would have been late May, early June of this year. Other than that, like getting the shots wasn't necessarily painful. I'm not like squeamish when it comes to needles or anything like that. So they offer to give it to you in a couple locations. You can get it in your arm or you can get it in your hip, left or right arm, left or right hip. I always chose the hip because you don't see it and because there's more fat there. And they just, like your lower back hip right here is where they give it to you. I always chose my right hip, just, I don't know why, I just did. So they would have you like stand and put all your weight on the hip that you're not getting your shot in, and then they just give it to you and it's like 3 seconds. I did have a couple of relatively painful injections just because then sometimes when they give you the prescription, it's already drawn up in the needle, and sometimes they just give you a vial. So when they give you the vial, the nurse practitioner or whoever is giving you your injection has to draw it up. So when they draw it up, they use an 18 gauge needle, and those are very big, and those were sometimes painful. But it's only like maybe 3 seconds. The first injection that I was given, they made me lay down because they're afraid that you might faint. So I had never been given a shot in that area before, and when you get your first injection, it's just procedure that they have you lie down. So they had me lie down on an exam table, and the nurse that gave it to me acted like she'd never given a shot before, like on a real person. So she acted like she was new, so she asked the doctor how to give a shot, how to give this one, and she told her, and I could hear them like out in the hallway giving instructions. And then she came in, and I can't remember if this one was already loaded in a shot or if they had to draw it up, but she told me to completely relax my leg and my hip, and she gave me the shot, and she just, the most slow application, just pushed the plunger down just extremely slowly. So the needles are pretty long. They go like into your muscle. So after a while of the needle being in my hip muscle wanted to like flex, but I knew that if I flexed it that it was going to hurt. So I was just laying there and trying my hardest not to flex my hip muscle. And this was in my left hip. And then instead of just pulling the whole syringe out, she unscrewed the needle tip off of the syringe and let the rest of the medicine drain into my leg and then pulled the needle out, which I've never seen anyone do that, heard of anyone do that, and the needle was in me for way longer than I was comfortable with. That was probably the weirdest one that I had, but it wasn't necessarily painful. It was just really uncomfortable. If you're squeamish with needles, I would say that's probably not the best method for you. I didn't have a problem with it because I'm not squeamish. But the Depo Provera injection did stop my periods. The first dose that I got, I had my period, and then a couple days later, I got my first injection. So I would say around about a month later, when my period would have come, I did get some bleeding, and that bleeding lasted around 17 to 19 days. It wasn't heavy all of those days. It was like a regular period, and then I had spotting from about day 7 all the way to about day 17 or 19. So it was about 10 to 12 days of spotting. And it wasn't every single day. Sometimes I would stop and then it would just start again and it would just be a little bit. I've heard experiences from other women where the bleeding lasts for months on end and it's heavy. So that was not my experience. If it had been, it probably would not have been the method for me. But the spotting I could handle, and I did not have a period after that. So I had basically one period the entire 4.5 years, almost 5 years that I was on Depo. Another thing that I noticed that was odd, but that I've heard was a common side effect, I did have breakthrough bleeding at times, and this would be mostly after like private times, if you know what I mean, because it's not YouTube appropriate. So it wouldn't last very long. It would last maybe 10 or 15 minutes, if that, and then it would stop. But I didn't have really any explanation, and I did ask my doctor, and she just gave me this weird look, and she was like, are there any open wounds? Are there abrasions that you can feel? I was like, no, it's just, I don't even cramp. I bleed for like 10 minutes afterwards, and then it stops. So I read online a couple of experiences from other women where that had occurred multiple times, but my doctor seemed unaware of it at the time that I asked her. So apparently it's completely normal. It is obviously annoying and inconvenient, but it doesn't last long and it's not necessarily painful. So mostly I experienced that for the first probably 2 to 2.5 years that I was on Depo. It would happen relatively frequently in those first 2 years, and then after that it would happen very scarcely, like periodically, maybe once or twice a year after that. And then in the last year that I was on Depo, it really didn't happen at all. It's very unpredictable, but it slowly tapered off. So those were the main symptoms that I had with Depo. Like I said, manageable, annoying, but manageable. And it was worth it for me to not have a period. So that's why that worked for me. Not necessarily a horror story, but still definitely had symptoms. Now I'm going to move to what I switched to and why I switched from Depo. During the entire time that I was on Depo, I was uninsured. So each dose of the Depo shot would cost me anywhere from $25 to $50, depending on which pharmacy I got it from and if I had a coupon, like with GoodRx. So I would pick up the prescription at the pharmacy, pay anywhere from $25 to $50 for it, and then I would go to the student health center and they would administer it for me for free, because I was a student there and because I was uninsured. Really, any of the stuff that I got done there, aside from like STD testing, was free. So the annual exams, pap smears were free. The represcribing process every 2 years was free. I think I paid maybe $60 for STI testing, which they told me that I had to get during my represcribing process. And I got a pap smear and that was free as well, when I turned 21. The only thing that cost me money was if I had to get a shot like during the summer, you would have to basically buy what they call summer insurance, which is $60. So you pay $60 to be able to go to the student health center and get basically everything that I needed done for free. So that was like your summer insurance, which I only had to do that once. So take it or leave it, it was way cheaper than getting it done at the hospital. When I got mine done at the hospital, I not only had to pay $25 to $50 for the shot itself, but then I had to pay $90 for them to administer it to me. And I did that the first time that I was given the shot, and then during one of the breaks from college, I was home and I had to get a shot. So I took the paperwork that they give you after each injection detailing where you got the shot, the date you got the shot, and the time of your next window. They give you that information so that you can go to other places to get the shot, and they have documentation of you getting your previous one. That's very important if you're trying to go multiple places to get your injections, like I was. So I went there and I got my shot there, and this was, I think, during spring break one of those years. And I was uninsured, like I mentioned before. I had an appointment. I made an appointment like a month and a half in advance to get my shot at the local hospital because I knew that I wouldn't be at school and the school would be closed. So I go to my appointment, I have my shot with me, I signed in and I sat down and I waited for 2.5 hours at this appointment. And everybody in the lobby had gone, into their appointment and come back out by the time that they called me. And she was like, yeah, you don't have insurance, right? I was like, no, but I paid for the price of the appointment last time, so I'm just here to get my injection and leave. Like, I've been here for 2.5 hours. And I had an appointment. And so basically they took me into this supply closet with like blood and urine samples sitting next to me and everything. This nurse comes in and she goes, oh, you're here to get your blood drawn. I was like, no, I have my shot with me. I just need someone to give it to me. And so she goes, oh, okay. So she had like all this stuff to take my blood in her hand. So she had to go back out, put that stuff away, come back in, give me my shot in this dirty closet, and then leave. And I don't know if they just like forgot that I had an appointment, like I'm supposed to have a room, I have an appointment, or if it was just an insurance thing, or I don't know, but they wanted to charge me $90 for that. They wanted to charge me $90 to give me my shot for a total of 3 seconds in this dirty supply closet with blood and urine and everything else. Yeah, it was gross. And they had to do a pregnancy test beforehand too, so they charged me for that. And they literally did the pregnancy test in the room, in the supply closet, with me in there. It was the most awkward thing ever and disgusting. So, my mom ended up calling the hospital and complaining, and I didn't have to pay that $90. And basically their excuse was, well, she's waiting for quite a while, so we wanted to get her in and out, like in a timely manner, which makes no sense because I had an appointment. Anyway, after that, I never went back to that hospital. That was where I was prescribed Depo. That's where I got my first dose. And after that experience, I didn't go back. I just stayed with the student health center because they were extremely nice, always treated me with dignity and respect and everything like that. So, and it was free. So I got my last shot in November of 2020 because I was still in school. I graduated in December of 2020 with my bachelor's degree. So I don't think I'm covered anymore over there. So I decided to switch to an IUD because it's much more low maintenance than the shot that you have to get every 3 months, and you pay a flat fee and you're done for 5 to 7 years for what I was getting. Most of the time you do not get a period on an IUD either. I'd done a lot of research on IUD options before I even considered getting one. So basically that was my experience with Depo. If you're considering getting on Depo, you do have to consider obviously the side effects and if it's going to work for your lifestyle and everything like that. For my lifestyle, it worked. It was relatively easy to maintain as long as you scheduled your annual and scheduled your 2-year checkup and everything like that and had your shot with you at all times during your appointment. Anyway, and the symptoms for me were manageable. So if that is something that you think you could do, then that might be a good option for you. So I am still uninsured. So when I was looking for IUD options, I asked the student health center if they could prescribe one to me, and they said yes, but they don't cover the cost of the IUDs. So it was going to cost me anywhere from $600 to $1,000 to get an IUD, depending on which brand that I wanted and the like when they administer it to you, how much that would cost, and the checkup, because you're supposed to get checked up 4 to 6 weeks after you get it administered. Obviously that was not an option for me, because that was, you know, one of the reasons I was on Depo in the first place. It would cost me, you know, if I had a coupon, I could get my shot for $25 and then get the injection for free. So, in the long term, obviously, IUDs are more cost effective because you pay for the appointment, you pay for the IUD, and then you're done for however long the IUD is good for. So for me, I had chosen Mirena because it lasts for 5 years and the hormone is the same as the one you get in Depo, but the dosage is much lower than the dose that you get each shot of Depo. And that's because the dosage in the IUD itself is lower than just one shot of Depo, and it administers it over a longer period of time. So your side effects should be lesser, at least after the first 6 months that you get it, and it doesn't cost anything after that. So that's what I decided to do because I'm uninsured and I want something that's going to last a long time, and I want something that I can set and forget and not have to deal with. So that's what I went with. I had asked my nurse practitioner at UT about options for me and the best one that she thought would work for me. We talked about that, and I decided on Mirena, or what I got actually was the sister brand, which is Liletta, and basically the same IUD but a different brand. So she had given me some options on where to get it. There is a company that will give you a free IUD, and they basically set up an appointment for you, I think, at one of the local hospitals. I was in touch with one of the representatives from that company, and I just couldn't maintain contact with her for some reason. I had set up a phone call and she didn't call me, and then it just went back and forth for a really long time. So I ended up calling the Planned Parenthood in Knoxville. So this was the second time I called Planned Parenthood in Knoxville, because the first time that I called was during the summer of 2020, and that's when I was first considering getting off of Depo. And there's like one call center that handles 4 locations in Mississippi and Tennessee for Planned Parenthood. So I called that call center, and I just asked about information on IUDs, and the lady that I talked to was extremely rude. And then I asked her, like, are you guys setting up appointments? Like, can I set up an appointment? She's like, well, we can't give you any information on the IUDs unless you have an appointment, and we're not making appointments right now because of the pandemic. So she wouldn't give me any information over the phone in terms of, like, the cost, which brands do they carry, like, how to set up an appointment, where do I go, any of that stuff. She would not even talk to me about that stuff. So I hung up with her and I called again, and I tried to get a different representative. And I asked him, I got a man this time, and I asked him, and he said, well, I can't give you any information on IUDs until 4:30. And I was like, what? That's so arbitrary. Like, it's like 4 o'clock now, and you can't give me any information on IUDs until 4:30? I was like, why? He's like, well, shift change. I was like, but you work there. Like, you can't give me any, like, you don't have the information on IUDs? And he was like, no, you have to hang up and call again. I was like, that's how I got to you. In the first place, I hung up and I called again. He's like, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, okay. So me being the emotional person I was, that ended up making me cry, because everyone that I spoke to was just a total ass to me. And I had no information. Still had the exact same amount of information that I had when I started. So when I actually told the nurse practitioner that at UT, and she told me that she used to work at the Planned Parenthood in Knoxville, and she was just absolutely shocked by that they had treated me that way. So after it didn't work out with the other company, I did call Planned Parenthood in Knoxville again, and this was a little over 6 months after the first time I called, and I got a different lady, and she was able to schedule me an appointment in Knoxville to get my IUD. I guess just because of the pandemic, they weren't having any appointments or anything like that. I don't know. They could have just told me that and not been rude in the first place, but whatever. So my window for my next shot would have been February, or mid-February to late February. So February 11th was exactly 12 weeks since my last injection. So I scheduled my IUD insertion on February 11th in Knoxville, and they tell you that you're supposed to self-medicate with like ibuprofen or something similar over-the-counter medication before you get your IUD. So I took 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, and I went to my appointment, which was at 10 o'clock in the morning on February 11th. So right now I'm about 12 days post-op since getting my IUD. And at first, when I got it, I thought I had made a mistake. I thought that I had chosen the wrong method and I was going to have to get it removed because it was that painful. So I'm going to just go back to the date of February 11th just to give some context. So we arrived in Knoxville at around 9:45 for my appointment. When we pulled into the parking lot, there was a protester, and he had all these abortion signs, and it was pouring down rain. He had an umbrella, still standing outside with all these signs. His car was parked in the middle of the street. It had signs on it as well, and he followed our car into the parking lot and watched me get out and followed me to the door, but he stood far enough away that he wouldn't be trespassed. And he started yelling stuff at me like, you don't have to do this, you don't have to choose abortion, you could choose adoption, like you don't have to do this, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at him and I was like, I'm not pregnant. I don't even know if that Planned Parenthood does abortions. It's like, I'm just here for birth control because I'm uninsured. And he acted surprised. He literally stared at me with his mouth wide open as if he didn't know that Planned Parenthood did other things aside from abortions. And he watched me open the door, and he was like, mother of an aborted child, mother of a murdered child. He kept yelling that throughout the parking lot. So I just ignored him. I went into my appointment, and he followed my fiance back to the car and then stood in front of our car with the anti-abortion sign. So, yeah, if it had not been raining, there probably would have been more protesters, but it was just him. So, at my appointment, while I was in the waiting room, they were tinting all of the windows in the waiting room because those protesters were able to see inside the building into the waiting room, and a couple weeks ago, that Planned Parenthood was shot at with a gun. So, yeah. So, I went into my appointment. They asked for my information and all this other stuff. The receptionist was so sweet. She made me feel a lot more comfortable because over the past few weeks beforehand, I was really psyching myself up and unnerving myself because I had done all this research and read some experiences from other women and knew that it was going to be painful, especially since I'd never given birth before, never been pregnant, and hadn't had a period in almost 5 years. So I knew that those factors were going to contribute to a more painful insertion process. So I was really nervous about that, but they led me into my appointment and they had me take a pregnancy test, and then they asked me a whole bunch of questions. They told me that the Mirena alternative they have is the sister brand Liletta, and I was fine with that. I didn't want Paragard or anything like that, which is the copper version. The nurse practitioner came in and she did a pelvic exam, and she showed me the IUD and what it looked like, how big it was, the inserter mechanism, all of that stuff. I don't know how much detail I can go into on YouTube without my video getting flagged or anything like that, so I'll just keep it plain and simple, but if you want to know this information, you can keep watching. If it's too TMI, I'll just cut it out during the editing process, but I might also put a timestamp, so if you don't want to hear this, you can skip to that time. So if you ever watched any like videos like describing the process, like any animated videos that describe the process of getting an IUD, you know that it looks scary. They insert the speculum and they use kind of like pronged scissors to stabilize your cervix. That doesn't hurt, but it's very uncomfortable. And then they have to disinfect your cervix with iodine. So they take a swab, 3 swabs actually is what they used on me. They swabbed 3 times with iodine to make sure that I didn't get an infection. And then they measure the depth of your uterus with an instrument called a sound. This for me was the most uncomfortable part of the entire procedure. I nearly passed out when they did it. So to get an IUD, in order to be basically a qualified candidate to get one, your cervix has to be at least 6 centimeters long. Because it will fall out otherwise, like it won't fit in your cervix. And for some women who have never had a baby before, the cervix is not deep enough to hold an IUD. So obviously for first time people who have never had one, never had a baby, you have to get measured. So what they do is they take the instrument and they measure from the top of your uterus to the opening of your cervix. And feeling the instrument hit the top of my cervix was so painful. Okay, sorry, my camera died. Getting my uterus measured was probably the most uncomfortable and painful part of the entire procedure. But it's necessary for them to consider you an eligible candidate for an IUD. So I measured 7 centimeters, so they were able to do that. I did almost pass out when they measured me, and I started hyperventilating, and they had to have a nurse come in and hold my hand to stabilize me on the table, and they gave me a cold washcloth to put on my forehead, and then they use the applicator for the IUD. They don't go all the way to the top, but they put it very close to the top. After that, I had moderate cramping. I did not fully pass out, but I was pretty close. She was like, yep, you're good to go. Here's something to wipe off with and a pad for afterwards. Put your clothes back on, and if you're feeling okay, then we will let you go. And also when they did the pelvic exam, they told me that my uterus is very posteriorly tilted. And that combined with the fact that I had never had a child before and that I hadn't had a period in almost 5 years, it made the process that much more painful. So she warned me that because of my anatomy and how the way that my uterus was tilted, that the cramps were going to be probably more severe, which I was prepared for because my menstrual cramps were always very severe. And that's just my anatomy. I can't do anything about it. What I wasn't prepared for was the strength of the cramps for the next couple days and how it would feel afterwards. They have to put a gel on the speculum so that it is administered easily. So you have that and the iodine in there. So they tell you that it's not common for you to bleed afterwards, but the iodine can stain your clothes. So they give you the pad. And I'm also allergic to latex, so I told them I was going to need non-latex gloves, non-latex garments, pads, stuff like that. So they did that for me. I didn't really wait after they inserted the IUD. I just kind of cleaned up and put everything back on and went and I paid. The entire process and the IUD only cost me the cost of the pregnancy test, which was $15. Like I mentioned before, anywhere else it would have been $600 to $1,000 for the entire process. So for someone that's uninsured, that's a really great way to get a long-lasting, safe, and effective form of birth control. So that's what I did. My fiance walked me from the door to the car because I was afraid that the protester would be out there again. Also, I was having kind of a hard time walking because at this time the cramps were pretty severe. On the way home, they were still very severe. The ride in the car didn't make it any easier. And I did take medicine beforehand, so I was surprised at how severe they were for being medicated beforehand. And I had given myself time for the medicine to kick in, too. I had about an hour. It was like a 45-minute to an hour drive to the location. So I took medicine before I left the house, and it took me about 45 minutes to get there. So I did allow time for the medicine to kick in. When I got home, I laid down with a heating pad, and I ate because I hadn't really eaten anything that day. I didn't feel dizzy or lightheaded, really, after that. The cramps kind of came in waves, so after I laid down and I was able to relax the entire lower half of my body, the cramps did subside for a couple hours. I ended up taking medicine again about 6 hours after my first dose, and I was able to sleep. I woke up again a couple hours later. Medicine had worn off at that time, and I started hurting really badly again. And this time the cramps came back very, very strongly. I could not find a comfortable position to lay in. They were so severe that I thought that maybe the IUD had perforated my uterus. I was not experiencing any bleeding, but the cramps were just nauseating, just so painful. And I was hyperventilating because I was panicking. So I was not only cramping, but I was also having a panic attack. And I was shivering because I was freezing cold. So I'm shivering, hyperventilating, my cramps are terrible. I'm laying in bed trying to relax. My fiance asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. And, I was like, I'm going to take some more medicine and I'm going to see if it helps. And I'm going to try to relax and calm myself down because I'm not in the right state of mind to do anything, to go to the hospital, to make any kind of judgment call on that. So I took some more medicine and I laid on the heating pad, and the cramps eventually did subside and I was able to go to sleep. The next day, surprisingly, I did not really have any cramps at all. I continued taking medicine every 6 to 8 hours, and I had minor cramping after I got out of bed that morning. But I took a shower and I laid back down and I let the medicine kick in, and I was able to go pretty much the entire day without having any cramping. I had a little bit of light cramping that night. I took more medicine and I went back to sleep. So the next day I was scheduled to work. I had taken 2 days off to get my IUDs, so the day that I got it, I had off, and then the next day I had off. So because of the day I'd had before, I thought, yep, I'm set to go to work. I'm not going to have any problems. So I worked at 3 o'clock that day. So I got up and I took medicine right before I walked out the door, and I went to work. I had basically just sprung out of bed. I didn't allow myself any time to relax and let the medicine set in. So when I got to work, I started having pretty severe cramps again. Because of that, I couldn't even stand up. I was basically doubled over in pain. They were really sharp. I could feel my uterus cramping around the arms of the IUD. So that was very painful. So I had to go home about probably an hour after I got there. So my brother picked me up and brought me home. And then not even the medicine would make the cramps go away. I had already taken medicine. I took more, and I had the worst cramps probably that I've had in my entire life for about 3 hours. And they would not subside. Nothing was helping. I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand, I couldn't walk, I couldn't take a shower. I tried the warm water, didn't help. Heating pad didn't help, medicine didn't help. No position I laid in helped, and they were bad. So I started panicking again because I thought, you know, I'd overexerted myself, maybe I perforated something. Still wasn't having any bleeding. So I just tried to relax again. I thought, you know, maybe if I did the same thing that I did the night prior, that they would go away. And eventually they did, but it took quite a while for them to go away. And I was still extremely bloated the entire time. From the time I got my IUD to about a week after, I was bloated. So day 1 and day 3 were the absolute worst days. I mean, some of the worst cramps I've ever had in my entire life. So after that, I was very hesitant to do any type of activity. I took the next day off of work as well, so that I could recover. I got my IUD on a Thursday. I had Thursday and Friday off. I tried to go to work Saturday, had to come home after an hour. So I only worked an hour in that 4-day span. I didn't go to work on Sunday either. Monday I had off, so I relaxed a little bit more on Monday. But Sunday and Monday, the cramps were pretty light to moderate. The medicine was getting rid of them. And I was able to walk and stuff like that, but I wasn't doing anything like strenuous. And then I would say I did not start to feel normal again until about 1 week post-op. So the next Thursday was when I finally started to feel better. I went to work Tuesday and I was able to work the entire shift on Tuesday. And then I had Wednesday off, and then I worked Thursday. And Thursday night, I finally felt back to normal. Since then, I've not had really any cramping. Sometimes I'll have 1 or 2 here and there, but since then, I've not been in any pain. It was very uncomfortable. Anytime that I bent over, I could feel the IUD like flexing, because they're very flexible. It's like silicone. I could feel that in my uterus. That was a weird feeling. And I couldn't really bend over without getting cramps. I can now. I'm 12 days after. But yeah, so because of the pain that I had on the 1st and 3rd days, I really thought that method was not going to work for me. I thought that I was going to have to get it removed. But luckily after that I felt fine. I was not prepared for the way that I was going to feel after. I kind of had this sensation of a UTI mixed with like a yeast infection because of the process of getting it. So the iodine and the gel that they use and just the combination of all that stuff really irritated me. So it was burning and itching and very uncomfortable mixed with the cramps. I was not prepared for that. I did have bleeding, not very much at all. Just the first day I had the smallest amount of bleeding. But other than that, I did not bleed at all. But yeah, that was the process of doing that. I really thought that I had made a mistake getting it, and I almost wish that I just stayed on Depo. But I'm feeling a lot better now, and Liletta is good for 7 years. So this does not have to come out until 2028, which is shocking to me, but yeah, and it's the same hormone. I haven't had, like I said, any bleeding. My Depo expired last Thursday, and today is Tuesday. So I haven't had any side effects other than the first week of horrendous cramping. Yeah, I don't feel any heartburn, acid reflux. I had 1 headache in the past week. Don't feel any looseness in my joints. No, nothing like that. At this point, I'm done talking about the procedure and everything of the IUDs, so I'll probably put a timestamp here if you wanted to skip any of that information. But yeah, I would say I had more of a horror story with the IUD than I did with Depo. The Depo really wasn't a horror story at all. It's just an average experience. I had an average experience. So if you wanted to hear the details of an average Depo experience, that would be my story. But if you wanted to hear just my experience with the IUD, I wouldn't consider it average. If you'd like any more story times, I do have a couple more planned. Then subscribe to my channel, and those will be out relatively soon. I'm going to do a story time on the time that I was stalked for over a year, and the events of that. And I might do a couple other story times. I'm also wedding planning. We are getting married in October of this year, so I might do some wedding planning things. You can find any of my art projections, any of the paintings you see on the wall. You can find those on my YouTube channel. Any of my art stuff that I did with the Rick and Morty paintings, you'll be able to find that. And we also just opened a business, so you can find the process of us opening the business and all of that good stuff on the business channel, which you should be able to find on my channel. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Let me know if this was helpful to you, any of the stories that I had with birth control, and let me know if you have decided on one because of this, or not, decided against one because of this. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys later.